Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Well, today you join me on the wrong side of the car because this Citroen C5 is from that British territory on the Mediterranean. You know, the one where everyone speaks English and fish and chips are readily available. No, not Torremolinos, Gibraltar. Gibraltar's been a British territory since 1713 when it was captured during the War of the Spanish Succession. Then it was formally given to Britain under the Treaty of Utrecht. I love all that history. But anyway, that isn't the subject of today's video. Today's video is all about this Citroen C5. This particular one from 2005 was actually given to me for free by a kind viewer. He was going travelling, didn't know what to do with it, had no use for it and thought it was too good to scrap. So he gave it to me for free on the proviso I would do something positive with it. What I'm going to do is give it to a mate of mine who's going to load it with medical supplies and then drive it to Ukraine. Thanks to you kind-hearted viewers, we've actually done this a few times now and it really helps. He's not coming to collect this for a couple of days, so I thought, well, why don't I do a video with it first? I've not actually filmed with a C5 before. Why not? You alright, Kiki? You might have noticed I've got my little French dog with me. Who better to give the verdict on a French car than a French bulldog? One of you guys, and I apologise, I can't remember your YouTube handle, but you've asked me for a Citroen C5 review every day for about 4 years. So, here you go. I am a man of my word. As always then, we'll start with a bit of history. Now, the Citroen C5 has been around since 2001. It actually replaced the Citroen Xantia. And the Xantia is a car which really sticks in my mind from my childhood. My dad had one for a couple of years in dark green. And a neighbour of ours had the estate version, also in dark green, and he used to take his son to the same school, so he'd occasionally give my brother and I a lift. In fact, I say occasionally, it was most days. So I've actually spent quite a lot of my childhood in Xantias. They were really quirky cars. Anyway, the C5 is the replacement to the good old Xantia. It's a big old car, this. It's bigger than a 3 Series, but not quite as big as a 5 Series. So think along the lines of a French Mondeo. Just sent a shiver down my spine then. French Mondeo, couldn't think of anything worse. Anyway, that's kind of what this car is. There are obviously lots of reasons to detest this car, but I'll get onto that later. Strangely though, there are also quite a number of reasons to like it. I actually find myself quite enjoying driving it, weirdly. I remember reading a magazine article about the Citroen C5 when I was a kid, back in 2001 when it launched. And alright, I didn't really know much better back then, but I thought it was quite an interesting car, with its hydro-pneumatic, adjustomatic suspension, and its oddball looks. I just thought it was interesting. I know I've mentioned this before in other videos, but for a while now I've been reading my regular magazines via an app called Readly, rather than buying a physical paper copy. Because I'm a car geek, I love reading car reviews. More often than not, I actually prefer reading car reviews than watching them. It's usually when I'm in a dentist waiting room or a departure lounge or actually flying somewhere, and that's the good thing about Readly. You can use the app offline, you don't need an internet connection. I just find myself getting lost in them page after page. It's a bit of me time. Reading's one of those pleasures in life that you just have to make time for. With Readly, you can download them to your phone and then read them whenever you like, even if you're 30,000 feet in the sky. It also means I don't have to find space in my bag for some dog-eared tatty magazine because it's all on your phone. Obviously, it's good for the environment too because it saves paper. Something else that's good about Readly, you know when you're on a streaming site and you're not sure what to watch, so it'll recommend certain shows? Well, Readly does the same thing. So, rather worryingly, Readly knows that I'm a complete anorak. You can also search for old editions that you haven't read for years and download those too. It's a really clever app. Very kick, brake test there. You can subscribe to Readly today and your first 2 months are totally free and you can cancel at any time. All you need to do is click the link below in the video description, which is readly.com/highpeakautos. That reminds me actually, I recently had my very first article published in a magazine, which is something I'm immensely proud of. In the column I was discussing rising car prices and trying to spot a future classic. I suggested trying to buy something a little bit more mainstream that perhaps people hadn't seen the value in. You know, something that's run-of-the-mill, but something that's also odd enough to be considered a future classic. Don't laugh now, but you could be looking at it right here in the Citroen C5. I mean, not this particular one, because it's more battered than a piece of cod you'd find on the rock, but just in general. I mean, when was the last time you saw a Citroen C5? They've all been scrapped. I bet there are genuinely fewer C5s on the road than R8s. I mean, it's quite an ugly car. I think I'll struggle to find a nice angle of it when I'm picturing it later. In my article, I commented that when a car reaches 21, that's the perfect time to buy a future classic, because it's right at that age where it's not considered old enough to be a proper classic yet, but it's also too old to be considered a modern, sensible daily driver. There is one slight problem with left-hand drive cars here in the UK. I'm now sat behind a tractor, and I daren't overtake because I can't see around it. Oh, there we go. Big articulated truck coming the other way. I think then I'll be here for the duration. How you doing, Kiki? If you were to find one like this, which has spent its whole life basking in the sun, I guarantee underneath there'll be zero rust. So styling wise, let's not kid ourselves, it's not particularly pretty, but in the very near future where every single car is a grey crossover, this might be considered stylish. Might, I said. Work with me here, guys. For now though, it's functional, it's French, it just does a job. Who cares what it looks like? You might be wondering what its job is. Well, I guess its job is to transport people from A to B in as much comfort and safety as possible. On that first count of comfort, it scores really well. This is such a comfortable car to drive and be in. I mean, look at these front seats. They're like armchairs. You get a nice comfortable armrest. They're very wide and soft. You just instantly feel at home. And moving back, it's more of the same. You get loads of headroom, loads of legroom, and the seats are really comfortable. Even Kiki likes it. The boot's also very roomy. In fact, it's what the French would call massif. Massif. In France, this car is known as a grosse voiture. And I would agree, it is a gross car. Gross is French for big, by the way, I'm not being rude. The estate version of the C5 is even more gross, in both senses. It's quite an ugly bus, but it is capacious. The rest of the car is just like any other car. You've got an engine up front which powers the front wheels, you've got a manual gearbox, 4 wheels and a horn. But something which is extraordinary about the C5 is the suspension setup. It uses quite a complicated hydro-pneumatic system, which means you can adjust the ride height for comfort. Have you ever seen a Mondeo do that? In real terms, what that means is when this system's working, it is so comfortable. Close your eyes and you could be in a Bentley. Of course, when you open them back up again, you're reminded that life hasn't quite gone to plan because you're in a 17-year-old Citroen with a manky steering wheel. Its 2-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine does a very good job though. It sips fuel, it's really economical this. It does sound like the engine from a van, but it feels solid and it pulls well, and you'll do 50 miles per gallon. They also offered the C5 with a 1.8 or 2-litre petrol engines, or you could even buy it with a 3-litre V6, and I don't recall ever seeing one in my life. Imagine how cool that'd be as a future classic. One of these with a 3-litre V6 petrol engine. I think that with my sensible cap on, you're better off with this 2-litre turbo diesel. It does a pretty good job and there's plenty of torque there to overtake. On this particular example, there are quite a few things broken, some loose trim, some rattles, but it is 17 years old. So I think you've got to cut it some slack. I also hate the key. It's quite possibly one of the ugliest keys ever designed. I suppose though none of that really matters because as soon as you take a seat in a C5, all is forgiven. The interior is quite sensibly laid out. You get 2 cup holders down there for your bottles of Orangina. What more could you need? You used to be able to pick these cars up for next to nothing, but now when you look on Auto Trader, there are hardly any out there. For an old cheap car, it does have quite a lot going for it. The air conditioning works, it's got cruise control, all 4 windows work, it's got a CD player. As cars go, or as cheap cars go, what more could you want? I'm not a fan of French cars, as you well know. I've got loads of horrible stories about them, but maybe that's because here in Britain, people just don't look after them. They're bought here in Britain mainly by people who don't know what they're talking about and they just need a car to get from A to B. Those same people don't look after them and then they break. Perhaps if you look after them, they aren't any less reliable than anything else. Who knows? It's a theory though, isn't it? Anyway, I think that's it then. For a French car, I am quite impressed. I mean, there are certain aspects of it which are rubbish, but then there are also aspects which are quite good. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. So there we go then, the Citroen C5. Maybe it's a future classic. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Right, cheers guys, thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Don't forget to check out Readly. That's readly.com/highpeakautos. And yeah, cheers guys. See you next time.